Dr. Suk Demon, an emergency physician at Surrey, British Columbia, and a board member of the Ketamine Assisted Therapy Association of Canada. We endeavor to empower practitioners and physicians to knowledgeably and safely deliver ketamine-assisted therapy. To ensure that our health system is shaped in ways that is empowering for practitioners and truly accessible requires active participation in regulatory change and collaboration for new and inventive solutions. With the continued development of high quality standards and engagement with communities and stakeholders, we can support interdisciplinary teams in delivering increased access to ketamine-assisted therapy. Join CATA Canada in supporting and empowering communities in shaping the policies and practices for how this therapy is delivered in ways that will make a significant impact on the current mental health crisis and for generational healing. Thank you.
There are many parallels in the sort of therapeutic protocols and the rituals that people have adopted that can be traced back to indigenous cultures, not to mention the plants themselves, the compounds themselves, even the second generation psychedelics and the synthetics all have a connection to indigenous plant medicines. I think that any company that's making enormous money, enormous profits from the psychedelics industry, which is exploding, there's just going to be a massive amount of wealth going in one direction. And so Erie is trying to sort of rebalance that a little bit. So that's where the reciprocity comes in.
Hi, I'm Kat Carter. Welcome to World Psychedelics Day. I'm so excited to be the host of this panel. Sandor Ironrope, who served as president of the Native American Church of South Dakota, and he's also the former chair of the NAC of North America. He works with the Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative, the IPCI. We're also joined by Joseph Mays, who's an ethnobotanist, and he is the project manager of Chacruna Institute's Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative. The Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative, the IPCI, is an international collaboration of leaders in the peyote conservation effort. The organization focuses on building sustainability and indigenous sovereignty of peyote across the US, Mexico, and Canada. Why is this organization necessary?
I think in this day and age, when you look at how things are done, I mean, it's unity is really important no matter what we're doing. And organizational structures, we all operate in a organizational structure as Indigenous folks, whether that is a spiritual or political or organization. In regards to conservation, it was deemed that the focus be primarily on the plant itself, and it is a biocultural plant, cacti. So we really have to unify indigenous to indigenous leadership first, and that has been done and has been on an ongoing continuum with the Huivatica people of Mexico, the Huicholi people of Mexico, and so it's really sensitive, I guess, right now because of the decriminalization movement. There are third parties that are involved, which is not really a direct communication dialogue with the leadership. So sometimes we have to be patient, and when those opportunities present themselves, but first and foremost, as far as indigenous to indigenous organizations, it's done a little bit different than sending the email out. Basically, sending a smoke signal and relying on prayer, um, and the sharing. A lot of today, this world, there's a lot of trust issues with almost everybody. So getting the smoke cleared up, so to speak, as indigenous people, we most of the time we share tobacco, and we talk, we share ceremony, and we talk. And so through those mechanisms, we unify, and that's what we have been done. And there's been a change of administration with the Rivadica people, so we're kind of patient when that opportunity arises to have dialogue with the leadership.
Is peyote endangered?
There's a constant a need, a desire for the communion with the peyote. And I'm 51 right now, and I heard from my uncles and my dad was born April 1st of 1928, and his dad, my grandpa, was born in 1888. But since the get-go, peyote has been endangered. Supply and demand has been an issue in the 60s. And as a growing numbers, as the Native American Church is a continued growing in membership throughout, the North American continent, there are some real issues as far as supply and demand and assessment of the southern region of Texas. I don't think there is one individual that could really go out and assess all the land that the peyote is on, but in a equation, in a type of equation, you can guesstimate that there is a shortage for this medicine.
Can you discuss how protecting Indigenous plants must also include protecting Indigenous rights and what this means in relation to the larger ecosystem?
I'm a Lakota, born in 1868, Fort Laramie Treaty Territory, and throughout my upbringing on and off the reservation, there has been a constant struggle for recognition, equal rights. When you look at Indian policies, 1924 was the Indian Citizenship Act in 1924. So my grandparents weren't citizens, although they were here in what is now known as South Dakota and Nebraska. But there's these policies that we grew up fighting with. My mom, she's part of the High Hawk family, the Tioshbai High Hawk, and some survivors from the Wounded Knee Massacre in December 29th of 1890. So when you're talking about indigenous folks, and there's always these struggles for recognition and equal rights, and the government, you really have to understand the assimilation process in it, and the boarding school eras and Carlisle boarding school. You really have to understand that, when these children were ripped from their homes and subjected to boarding schools back in the day when the church was involved in the assimilation process in the Catholic Church. And there was some news that came out of Canada that there was an old residential school that was found, and there were a mass grave of children were found. Now that's alarming. Who is responsible for that? And when you're talking about First Nations people, you're talking residential schools. When you're talking American Indians or Native Americans in the United States, you're talking boarding schools. Same situation. So when you understand Indian policy, there was a General Pratt. He kind of coined the term "save the man and kill the Indian," and so there was an assimilation process in it. And you wanted to wipe out the Indian problem. There was a problem with the American Indians. In 1830, there was an Indian Removal Act, and the 5 civilized tribes from the Smoky Mountains region removed to Oklahoma. So there is a big history in the United States, and you have to come to terms with it to understand the biocultural paradigm when we're talking about a plant, a culture in it. You can't fabricate the truth of the matter, and it's connected. But the other thing I would say about it is that folks like to use different terms. And if you talk to an indigenous person, they'll say, we don't own the land owns us. We're just the caretakers, the stewards of this land. And every indigenous tribe has the same territory, a similar territory that they take care of, because Mother Earth takes care of them. So there's already this reciprocity that exists in indigenous cultures, but that was annihilated, and almost, a culture annihilated.
Sandor, how can people who are interested in using plant medicines, how can they use them consciously in a way that respects their role in culture, in the ecosystem, and in ceremony?
Continued learning process for all of us, because there's a balance in everything. And sometimes respect means just leaving things alone. Do you remember when you messed with your mom's items, and maybe you took a lipstick that she knew about, and she was asking somebody for the lipstick, but you knew you took it, but you didn't say nothing? Or your dad's tools, and he knows his tools were missing, and somebody took a tool and didn't put it back, but he knew. So you had to just put it back and respect it and leave it alone. Almost a similar concept sometimes. The world needs healing, but don't forget it and overstep or undermine the indigenous, the indigenous tribes who have endured, a near annihilation of their whole culture, their whole people. Ishi from California, the last of his tribe. Now look, there's no tribe. So there's a constant battle to find balance in everything. And, that's where I'm at, is to try to find balance in things, coming with good intention and a good heart, not with the Western mindset of everything is mine, I want it now. No, that's not going to work. You'll find yourself in a place where you'll know that doesn't work. But ultimately, respect is the key virtue in everything that everybody does, and we should really know what that means. Sometimes that means just being a friend and listening, and sometimes that means doing a little bit more. But it's a constant work in progress. You know what I mean?
There's a big learning curve that's happening, and I mean, what this is maybe too general a question, but what does real reciprocity look like, particularly at this important time, in terms of the environmental crisis? But what does that look like?
And the first thing that I think is really understanding indigenous paradigms and medicines and reciprocity, language, loss of language, almost a loss of culture, spiritual identity. We really need to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it and how effective we are in doing so. And one thing about the Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative is to reconnect our tribes to the land, because we didn't have access to the land. And Mother Earth is therapeutic in what she gives to us. And that's a healing concept in itself. But we were denied because of private ownership and the system that was implemented by the Texas Department of Public Safety, Texas Department of Health in the early days, and DEA. There's always these permitted systems in place now. You know, in the Controlled Substance Act of 1970, everything is classified in such a way that kind of prevents us. However, Indigenous people have been fighting for exemptions, for our rights, and in a sense, the current policy to the American Indian Freedom Religious Act, the amendments, Public Law 103-344, decriminalizes peyote on a federal level for Indigenous people. And so there has been a struggle that people may not understand. And prior consent is another thing that we're talking about, because there were no prior consent to decriminalization here. And that's a big issue. And so in really understanding what are we talking about in reciprocity, we really have to, do we understand how we're giving back to the Indigenous people? What do they, you know, ask them, don't decide for them, you know, what do they need? How do they need it? We all live on this earth. We all live on Mother Earth. We all can help each other, but there's a balance in it. We have to find that balance in it.
We talked about that relationship, and there was a sort of continuity that was broken, perhaps, you know, because of colonialism and the war on drugs, and then, you know, criminalizing ceremony and banning ceremony, even ones that didn't, you know, use psychoactive, you know, plant and medicine plants. But do you think that there is something that maybe hopefully is happening, and that partly could, that psychoactive plants and psychedelic experiences will be teaching, like teaching non-Indigenous people, like that they have, that what that white supremacist deeply ingrained mentality is, that there might be a shift that could happen that is more akin to an Indigenous perspective about the land, and that our place within nature, not apart from it.
I think so. I mean, there's other you know, plant medicines out there that could deepen the learning of an individual. There's other plants that contain mescaline, a psychoactive substance in peyote. There's other remedies to it. You know, in the olden days of Lakota people, you know, we fasted. When you fast, you deplete your body of a lot of things, and including water, and you elevate your conscious level, you know, 2 times more, 3 times more, and you're in tune with your spirit by just fasting, and your body is more attentive. I mean, so in the olden days, we were elevating our consciousness by just fasting out in nature. And even that itself is natural. And so it's up to the individual and how far they want to go with the proper instructions, you know, to be able to do it. Because that's the other thing is that I shared, is that, you know, indigenous perspectives are naturalistic elements, you know, the earth, the wind, the fire, you know, space, and Mother Earth, you know, she gives a lot. Any ceremonies that we have almost have to do with nature and the elements around us. And you look at all of our ceremonies, there's always the fire, there's nature around in some fashion. But when you start to take different elements and components out of ceremony, then it becomes something else. We resonate with Mother Nature with a vibration, with a song, and there are certain tribal people that are in tune with their medicine people and how they obtain or harvest that medicine. It has to be harvested in a spiritual way. in order for that plant to fully give itself for that purpose. And then you would call upon that plant in a spiritual sense through song and vibration. And indigenous people understand that and know that, rather than taking everything out, well, I'm going to synthesize mescaline and give it to you in a pill, but that's not a ceremony. It's not a peyote. So there's a lot to understand in regards to indigenous tribes and people. And in that, you would also have a fear of appropriation. You know, there's a balance in it, is what I'm saying. We need to find the balance in it, because appropriation has been happening before I was born. It continues to happen. And the reason why I say that, because it's out there. It's out there. And we have to be mindful of what we're leaving our children, or what, you know, what it is. I know what I'm going to leave my children, and my grandchildren, because now today I am a grandparent. So how are we going to go forward, listening to each other, being respectful of each other in that context, you know?
I guess we would wonder, how it's used and how often and what for.
Well, I'll share a little bit, not in ceremonial context, but for educational purposes. And healing initially for us, and it's a wonderful teacher. It's your grandparents. It's a spirit. It's everything that you may not want to see about yourself. It's a wonderful mirror image. You know, it's a lot of things to us, but it's healing. It's insight. It's getting in tune with yourself, you know, and where you're at. And so, you know, a lot of different ceremonies out there. The Huichol people's, their ceremonies, it's a little bit different. How they communicate with it. Every region is a little bit different, and how, but it's the same, you know, and a communication to it, you know. So, and how often, it just depends on the ceremony and the purpose, you know.
I noticed that in California, in the I think it was in January, February, they were introducing legislation for legalization of psychoactive plants, and or psychedelics, actually, I guess, as well, synthetic ones. And I understand that peyote was actually, in fact, not included in the California State Senate Bill 519 to decriminalize certain psychedelics. And that was in the interest of protecting traditional Native American spiritual practices. So is that sort of like the right direction, or at least on one count?
The National Council of Native American Churches, which I am a part of because I'm the current chairperson for the Native American Church of South Dakota, and a board member of the Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative. And I'm also the former president for the National Native American Church of North America. And so in advocating and having counsel, we all agreed that we would emphasize decriminalization, not including peyote in their movement. Some movements complied, some didn't. Some said they would, but still posted images of peyote out there. And the reason for that was that sometimes the indigenous folks just want to be left alone. And so there is a lot of reason to do that. We discussed briefly a little bit about, you know, mescaline, synthetic mescaline. We discussed briefly about it, and some others feel that we should stand against synthetic mescaline, but in our council, we talked about it, and we said that if it could be derived, its molecules could be made from other plants. It could be made from not specifically peyote. It could be reproduced in the lab in its molecule format, but it itself, by itself, is not peyote, because it does not contain the other alkaloids involved with the plant itself. So we could only stand in support of the peyote plant itself. And so we pushed, we had some connections and we had some allies in California that connected us to Senator Wiener's office. And the lady at his office was, she was new to as far as culture and peyote goes, but she was willing to learn and listen, and really did take heed to the National Council of Native American Churches perspective and position on it. So it was, in a sense, a win-win situation there, because along with some of the attorneys that we work with, the language was, it was pretty good language that they used in it in respects to indigenous cultures and tribes and the peyote plant itself.
I'm thinking about how there's still going to be so many psychedelic tourists, and this is a question for Joseph as well. There's going to be so many people, who non-Indigenous people who still feel like they should, go seek this stuff out, and why should they be denied that particular, access to that plant?
Well, that's a tough one, because some of us have grown up with this plant, since day one. Some of us die with this plant. We're not just recreational users, or if you would put it that way. This is part of our life. This is our life. This is who we are. And to come in with a mindset to just play around with it or to experiment with it without full awareness of what you're doing on a spiritual sense, you can open a spiritual door and you could get yourself lost. You can hurt yourself in light of healing. Searching for healing, you could get yourself lost. And so when you look at that you really have to look at what you're doing. When you dive into a pond, do you know how deep the pond is before you dive into it? Most of us would know. And so in the same sense, you really have to know what you're doing. And the biocultural component to these plants are the indigenous tribes. What are you doing to them? Some tribes would say yes, because we need money, or some people charge to do this for money. And money is a factor in everything. And people would say, oh yeah, I can charge and you can have this experience. But in indigenous culture, it was never about money. And that came into play, and it had an influence on some people. And so everything is geared around the mighty dollar. But in the spiritual sense of things, when you're talking about the spirit, there's a lot of things that you have to be careful with it. I know my mom and my dad, they were buried. They were buried in a peyote way. They were buried that way. My dad was a Korean conflict veteran of the United States. He was a full-blood Lakota, fighting for original homeland and fighting for the United States of America. And yet we're still fighting for our rights to be understood by dominant society. So really, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing?
And Joseph, I guess similar question, but maybe let's, in terms of like the Amazon, like the idea that people are, are going to, Amazonian countries, Peru and elsewhere, and partaking in ayahuasca ceremonies, and yet they've, all that CO2 spent to like fly there, and the impact of tourism in general, but psychedelic tourism to have that sort of spiritual or emotional transformation, but you're doing like potentially doing a lot of damage at the same time. So can the plant come to people instead of the people going to the plant?
I think it really ties into my project and what I'm doing for Chacruna, is just encouraging people who are psychedelics enthusiasts, even if they are aware of what they're doing, and it's not just recreational, it's still important to understand your place in this system of relationship, and that involves really acknowledging the costs of your activities. So that includes traveling. And I'm not here to tell people that they shouldn't go and seek out medicine where they're called, but there are other things that you can investigate where you are. You know, what the land that you live on is indigenous. There is a tradition wherever you're located in the world, there are still indigenous people, and there are still plants and plant traditions that you can connect with without having to leave and travel to the Amazon. But another thing that we're concerned with is supporting indigenous communities so that they're not tied to those tourism economies, because those economies are volatile. As we saw in the past year, many people that were dependent on tourism had to find other ways to support themselves. And so one of the guiding principles of this initiative is to support communities in whatever way they have determined they want to move forward. So they're trying to build their own streams of income. They're trying to build their own resilience. And so I think one of the things that everyone should seek to do is support autonomy, support the agency of these communities, whether they choose to use ayahuasca tourism or engage in tourism. Those choices are always happening within a context, and it's not so simple as, like, reciprocity isn't so easy to define as just like, I'm paying for this, and so that's my reciprocity, is I gave money to this retreat center or this one family or community, and then that paid for my experience. Something that you have to carry with you and integrate into your life, and I think it impacts all of your decisions. So yeah, I think there are a lot of inherent contradictions, though, in seeking to connect with a medicine that ideally gives you a better appreciation for your environment, for the people who protect the environment, and then at the same time has all these costs for the communities and for the environments where the medicines come from.
You know, it's a balance. I keep saying it's a balance, because when you look at indigenous communities, for the most part, there's no economy, there's no system. Here in South Dakota, it's the majority is tourism. People come to see Crazy Horse, people come to see the Black Hills, people come to see Mount Rushmore, you know, and learn about, you know, culture. And so, you know, in the olden days, you know, it was about sharing with a good heart. And then money became the commodity. And so then it turned into tourism. And when you look at, you know, Pine Ridge Reservation, in those days, it was like basically still kind of is. There's the economical system on it. There's nothing there. And when the government put us on these lands, they made sure that it wasn't a farmable land. They made sure that it was kind of a bad land. And you could go see the Badlands right where we're at before you get into our reservation. So there's a system that's here. But, you know, if you go and pay for, you know, there's a balance in it. So in today's world, you can't get by without money. You need gas money. You need something. All of us don't drive a Tesla, you know, and so you need gas money to get over to do a ceremony. There's a balance in it. I'm not saying, you know, that it is not possible to help somebody to get your medicine person to get over there, but there's a balance in it too, you know, about tourism. Well, I want to go pay for an experience. You're going to pay for that experience to an organization, but where does that plant come from? Who are the indigenous tribes connected to that plant? Are you helping those people in their village or in their tribal area with the sustainability of economy or something aside from just that? Because I think it was really beneficial when you're talking about reciprocity. How are we giving back to help people sustain themselves? Language, culture, economy. There's a lot that we have to do and learn. in order to really understand what we're giving back, how we're giving it back, and the circle of giving is that way. In indigenous cultures, we give. Sometimes Lakota people are kind of deemed for being too generous. Mitakwe Oyase is all my relations. So some people didn't understand that fully, but they said all my relations. But the concept and philosophy of the IV is a world view, but it is geared around respect, generosity, and prayer. So when we give, sometimes we give too much. But if you really want something, you have to give first, and it'll come back to you with a full heart. So there's the balance in it, and I keep going back to the balance because that's what I believe.
And then this piece of around like the larger environmental picture, again, back to that point that supporting indigenous people is supporting plant medicine, is supporting the environment. So you want to comment on that, Joseph, as a ethnobotanist, as an expert in environmental science, that people are still not, say, in the psychedelic or psychoactive plant communities, seeing that connection to the environment.
Sandor mentioned the biocultural aspect before, and that's really the key, I think, is that biological diversity and cultural diversity are inextricably linked, and there's a wealth of data that shows that like higher areas of higher ethno-linguistic diversity are areas where there's higher biological diversity. So there's a global correlation between indigenous people and biological diversity. And if you look at protected lands like reserves and parks where people are pushed off the land, where there's a method of conservation which involves removing people and protecting the land, those areas have, if you put them up against indigenous managed lands or community owned forests, there is more carbon storage, there's more biodiversity in the community managed, indigenous managed lands. So if you're supporting indigenous culture, you're also supporting nature conservation. The two goals, the two projects are connected, they're one and the same. So some people that are worried about the environment, they're worried about the climate, they're worried about conservation, they don't know how to approach the issue. And some people haven't made that connection yet. And they see people as the problem, which really it's a small amount of the people on Earth that are causing the majority of the destruction. And it's the system that they've built, which we are all a part of. And it's that same system that we're using to pay for things and make exchanges. And so there are institutional and governmental things that need to change, like the way that the government has dealt with indigenous people and still does in the United States and other countries has to change. And there are many different ideas for how to enact political change. This initiative is more based on individuals and people being able to do what they can in their own lives. But I do believe that more there has to happen besides just that. And yeah, just that biocultural connection is really important, though. I want to stress that.
I'd agree.
So if you could give examples of like the work of what's happening with the work you're doing with both of your organizations.
But about reconnecting with the peyote plant and its environment, its ecosystem, because of the system implemented, we weren't really able to really connect to it. And the peyote system is not a spiritually harvested system. It's harvested peyote for money, and that it's a business in an aspect. So peyote pickers are included under the current peyoteros permit, and they go out and they pick, sometimes not on authorized land, poaching medicine. Also the way that it's harvested sometimes is harvested too much stem, and it kills off the plant itself. And so there's a lot of that going on right now. and the energy, because everything is about the energy exchange in the process of harvesting. So the energy that around the harvest, it has to go back to our spiritual way of harvesting it, because mental health is an issue, and because it always has been an issue with, you know, the colonization of our people and the forced assimilation and the trauma induced and the historical trauma issues and COVID-19 issues, isolation. It is a mental health issue today. And you have to really wake up, wake your spirit up and ask yourself, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What are you ingesting in your body? How healthy is it for you? And that in same respects to us as our medicines. Who harvested our medicine? Who harvested it? What mindset were they in when they harvested it? Did they pray for our generations? Did they pray for a specific purpose? Was this medicine harvested for that intent? Don't over harvest what you need to use for that purpose. So the conservation strategy that we have implemented to cultivate, regenerate, to assess the land, the accessible land that we have, to build a relationship with ranchers, because that's their livelihood as well, to respect the land, to be able to put the paradigm of healthy living with Mother Earth and all that she gives to us back into harvesting, spiritually harvesting medicine, because it's about energy, the energy that you have, the spiritual aura that the harvester has to be about that purpose, that prayerful purpose, because the plants hear us. Everything hears you. It knows what you're thinking. It knows how you're thinking. And if your mind isn't clear, then that medicine knows your mind is not clear. You think you know something, but you didn't know yourself that well. And this plant, it knew you before you even knew yourself. It knows these things and how you are. You can't hide from it. You can't do it. So you have to clean yourself and your mind and be able to harvest it in such a way that isn't geared around a monetary purpose. So connecting our people back to that, because mental health is and always will be a concern. Mental health.
The mental health aspect is so important because it's also affected by the health of the environment and of the community, and all of those things are connected and can't really be separated. And for our strategy, the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative is, we partner with different organizations that are all small scale and grassroots and led by Indigenous people to meet their own self-determined needs. So it's not restricted to people that use psychoactive plants necessarily. The diversity of traditions, we stress relationships to the land irrespective of which medicinal plants are used. And we've strived to include groups that are often left out of the conversation in psychedelic circles or in the tourism economy. And it has a community-centered nature. So it's focused on collective efforts, and it has a structure that's attempting to avoid intermediaries wherever possible. So seeking to serve Indigenous communities without creating bureaucracies or barriers, and ensuring that agency and autonomy and the focus remains with the recipients and not the donors of the money. So it comes back to the idea of reciprocity that Sandor really illustrated so well. It's not so simple as repayment or equal exchange, because there's never a way that the monumental injustices suffered by the land, by the people, by Indigenous people could be solved or repaid by the same forces in the same system that caused it in the first place. And what we really want to encourage is people to have a deeper consideration of what reciprocity really does mean. And for me, that means asking what my place is in this system of relationship, and with the position I have and what with the gifts that I've been given, because many of the traditions that I've learned from have taught that that life is a gift that we've been given by plants, by the land, and that we really owe everything to them. And so it is in that spirit that we kind of designed this. And we stress that relationship, and that the idea that life is a society is in a constant state of flux, and there's always a perpetual reordering and rebalancing, and it is about that balance and finding that balance. And it's imperfect, but it is trying to give an avenue for people to try to embody reciprocity in their lives. And there is no perfect way, and there are so many contradictions, as we've been talking about, with just using money and paying for ceremony. But there are multiple different ways, and they're all we can try to use all of them. And one of the models that, like, especially the psychedelic renaissance, all these businesses that are going to be profiting from plant medicines, they like to think about things in terms of access and benefit sharing. Like, they're going to give some of their profits to the group that they think owns the medicine, or has some claim to the intellectual property. But I think that's ripe for conflict, and also it leaves some people out, some communities out. And so this is a different way of looking at it, where it's not just it's focused on a more general sense of reciprocity to Indigenous people, regardless of whether they're part of any access and benefit with a particular medicine or plant. It's not restricted to that, and it's just meant to directly connect, people in the global north who are now going to, as psychedelics become more popular and available, are looking for a way to give back or live reciprocity in their lives.
One thing that I would add about our organization is that, it's a new organization. It's Indigenous-led organization. And in this day and age, 2021, everything is so super fast. Everybody wants everything here and now. They want it yesterday. This is a prayer. This preservation and conservation has always been a prayer from Mother Earth, a prayer for our water, clean air. It is a prayer. It's a living prayer. And you understand this prayer in every relationship. There is a responsibility to every relationship. Every kinship has a responsibility. You have a responsibility to your spouse. That's a little bit different than your responsibility to your mom or your dad. But every relationship has a responsibility. And you have to learn what that responsibility is to all of your relationships. And we all have a relationship to Mother Earth. We all have a relationship there. But some of us have been in this relationship longer than some of you, because you just woke up. Some haven't even woken up yet. But here we are to learn about each other and share effective communication. I wasn't born just yesterday. I didn't just wake up and say, I want to be Lakota. I was born this way. And I understand a little bit about how the world operates, because my parents had to fight to survive. My grandparents weren't even recognized by this government. And a lot of my relatives have lost their lives at the hands of this government. So my responsibility today is to share a little bit to dominant society in the Western world, a little bit about who we are, and in a cautious way, in light of leaving something for my grandchildren, and to understand that responsibility in my friendship with non-natives. Friendship. There is a friendship that I share with a lot of non-native people who respect us, who respect family, because we're all family. Everything is a family. Everything is a male and a female, the night and the day. Everything is a family. The spiritual plants, everything is a family. And you have to have a concept of the family in your mindset. It's the mindset that you have to clean out, your mindset. We're all related, but some of you don't want to be related. The mindset of Western everything is there's a responsibility. And that's what I'm just sharing, is that responsibility in it. We're trying to share who we are as Indigenous people in light of preservation before it's all destroyed.
So what message would you give to those watching this at home in front of their computers? How could they support your project and also Indigenous people?
I would just say thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for wanting to understand yourself. Thank you for whatever it is that you contributed to the well-being of your family and to your community, because that's how it all spreads. You see the pebble hit the water and the waves went out. You know that it touched everything. And your community, you're doing something positive, whatever that is, teaching your children, your grandchildren, what you were taught, the respectful values system that you were shared. And then that goes and trickles down to everywhere so that the world could have a little bit of every circle that is connected, because we all have an inner circle. We all have a light, and our light shines bright when we do goodness, and that goodness is spread. The Creator's love is in everything. Creator's miracles are in everything that we see around us. It is all around us, but it's our mindset that can't see it. It's all right in front of you. And if you're doing something beautiful for your children and your grandchildren, I want to say thank you to you, because that's all that we're doing. We're trying to leave something for our grandchildren so that when they look at things, they could find their direction. They know their path. They know their spiritual identity. It's been lost so much, you know. So I want to say thank you for being our friend. Thank you for being who you are, and give from your heart. Do what's in your heart. That's all that you can do.
Beautiful. Joseph, if you had something directly to share.
That idea of gratitude is so important. That's kind of the soil where reciprocity is able to take root. So having gratitude is really important, and having that mindset. But I think a lot of people maybe aren't living connected to their heart, or they don't have that mindset or that perspective where they view everything as part of a family that they are a part of. And so it's hard to change your belief or your perspective just by choosing to. So like if you're conditioned to see the world a certain way, you can't just flick a switch and then now you see it a different way. And so I think all I can say is that for me, it's been a matter of daily practice, something that you have to actively participate in every day, and slowly and gradually you see that you do begin to see things differently, and you do feel like you see the people and the plants and everything as part of a community that's alive, and that you're part of this family. And sometimes I get people ask like, how do you change the way, if you don't see nature as alive, or the forest as alive, or plants as beings that have agency, that have intelligence, then how can you change that? And I think having gratitude and also making a daily practice of it in your own life, just the way that you consume things, the way that you interact with things, and your relationships where you are, I think tending to the garden that you can touch, and focusing on where you are, acting locally, thinking globally, and supporting Indigenous-led organizations.
My last years were as a environmental journalist, and just always it just seemed Indigenous people were at the forefront of those battles. And one that just resonated so deeply and was so criminal was the former president that shall not be named, when he reversed the decision on the protection of the Grand Staircase Escalante and the Bears Ears National Park, and that's in Utah, not South Dakota. But I was just thinking, Sandor, as you're speaking about, the plant medicine, but also whatever, this protection of the sacred spaces. And of course that goes into real estate, but it's like that, how just how imperative that restitution takes place. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, it's a constant battle um, to share what these places mean to us as Indigenous people, um, by our predecessors, our ancestors, our grandparents, and so forth, about their first connection to these sacred spots. Because a lot of energy and prayer and exchange of spiritual energy was shared. And so a place deemed sacred by a certain tribe has a spiritual and historical place with our ancestors that goes beyond the Western mindset for real estate. And it's a constant battle to try to share understanding of what that means. And it's unfortunate that sometimes people's understanding come when their life is going to end. When their life is going to end, and then they think about certain things that they should have done or they should have said. But the spiritual awakening is right in front of people to understand Indigenous perspectives, maybe not fully understand, but at least listen, empathetically listen to the concerns or to the suggestions of what is deemed sacred, keeping things sacred. When Standing Rock was going on, Mother Earth was crying, and people heard because it has always been a prayer for healthy water, for a clean air, and for the issues that these companies bring to our land. You can't reverse it. You can't reverse it. And so when we're talking about generational responsibility, we all have it. We all have it. And until you're stripped away from your comfort zone, then you might understand something of what it means to survive. Survive out in the elements, survive. How can you survive? Do you know how to survive? So the old paradigms become elevated to the forefront again, and Indigenous people and concepts are at the forefront again, because it's a system that allowed us to coexist on Mother Nature. That's the whole idea, is to coexist in a respectful way. But people won't understand it until it's almost too late. And that's where we are with our environment. Sometimes it's almost too late. But don't be that person. Don't be that person. You can wake up now. Don't waste no time to wake your spirit up, so that when your time is on, it's on, when you're done on Mother Earth, you can accept the spiritual nature of where you're going. You can accept it and say, I done good. I did my life. I gave back. I did my best to live in a balanced and harmonious way, not for greed, but for harmony, because you, somewhere in there, you have loved ones, you have children, you have grandchildren, and everything that you do is going to affect them right now. And so what is it that you're doing? Is it for greed, or is it for a harmonious balance of understanding each other, so that we could all reap the benefits of what good health means? Good health, that's what it is. Good health.
Beautifully put. Thank you so much. Joe, do you have something to add about, I guess, the protection of sacred places as well as plants?
One of the root causes of so many of our problems is this idea of alienation, and that people are alienated from the land, and that something that's distinct about many Indigenous communities is that they still have that connection to the land, or they're at least taught that by their parents. And we are trying to relearn that as much as possible. And one of the benefits of plant medicines for many people of psychedelics is that they feel like a de-alienation process begins, and you are no longer so alienated from the place where you are, from the things that you're consuming, from the relationships that you have, and that is, you know, the core from which will flow a healthier relationship, a more harmonious, balanced relationship, is having a renewed connection to the people around you, to the other organisms, the plants, to the land. And it is a constant battle, as Sandor was saying. It's not something that changes with a new administration either. There's still oil flowing through the Dakota Access Pipeline. There's still fracking that's not going to be banned. The Alaska oil drilling project is still being defended by the new administration. It's something that we all have a responsibility to constantly be vigilant of and question our own decisions. But yeah, I think that, yeah, the idea of alienation is what I always come back to, and the idea that we need to restore the connection that we have with each other, with the land, and that will naturally produce more healthy outcomes and relationships. But there are definitely some things that are on a systemic and institutional level that need to change as well. It's not just personal, individual decisions.
We need to remember that we do all have agency and we do all have power, and that to support the protests and raise up indigenous voices and start listening. And you know, like in Canada, our government put down, like, what is it, hundreds of millions of dollars to double the flow from the tar sands to, you know, ship off to China. And it's like our taxpayers' money, and that will never be remediated, that, you know. And the indigenous people who live there, it's like land of Mordor. I'm sorry, it's like, it's a, you know, it's a very upsetting issue.
You know, in the beginning of this psychedelic renaissance, if you will, I was very reluctant to share and about who we are and our issues, because it seems like everybody wants to just take it. Everybody wants it for themselves. But I felt that, you know, if I didn't start to say something, then I'm not being responsible for my children and my grandchildren. And I'm not here. You may not agree with everything I say, but I was born Lakota, and I was born this way, to share in a good way. And that's all I'm doing, is sharing in a good way, so that somebody may think about what they're doing and how they're contributing to the health and well-being of their children, because it's about all of us. And I said that before, is that without unity we can't do anything. Without unity we can't do it. You can't do it by yourself, and you're not going to take all your money to the grave or to the spiritual world. You're not going to do it. And what is it that you're contributing to your health, to your family's health? I'm sure there is somebody that you really love, to your heart, and if something were to happen to them, it would break your heart and make you cry. And think about those little children that are crying right now, that don't have food, don't have water, clean medicine, healthy medicine. We have to be able to understand that we are a part of this bigger picture. You alienate yourself because of your mindset, but everything that you have to be inclusive is right in front of you. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of those that listen, but I'm here to share our perspective, and for those that would listen, you know, to be a friend, to try to be a good friend to you and share something positive in your life for the betterment of our world. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Sandor, for including me in this conversation, and Kathleen for facilitating. It's like Sandor is saying, I'm just trying to listen, and that's one of the guiding principles of this project is respecting and listening to local people and not trying to impose a model of conservation or reciprocity from the outside. And yeah, I think being acknowledging that you're part of a community and trying to think about how you can embody that in your life is all we can really do as individuals, but also we can't do it alone. Like as Sandor said, we have to be unified, and that's connected to your mindset. And so another thing that I really have found important is the idea of the story that you feel you're a part of, the story that you tell yourself about who you are, and the plant medicines, the people that you interact with has to change. You have to reorient yourself. If you find that you don't have this connection, that you're alienated, it's very much connected to that. And that only happens through action, through participation, and it's constant as well. So I think there are so many forces around us that are always pushing us away from that. And so it takes effort. You have to be deliberate about it. And part of that is also listening. So I think, yeah, I'm very grateful to be here, and thank you for listening and allowing me to speak. But yeah, I appreciate it.
I look forward to better communication and being able to share with each other and learn from each other, and how we could help our communities in a healthy way. So thank you all that facilitated this.
Really profound words. So we really appreciate it. We're so honored to have both of you, or all of you, Sandor and Joe, and we'll have links to your organization. And we urge people in the psychedelic and psychoactive plant community to really respect and honor and listen to Indigenous voices, and not to be glib, but really that's going to save our species and the planet if we start paying attention and amplify those voices, So thank you both so much.